Hi everyone, and welcome to another Lesser Known History Homeschool History Lesson, where every month we take a look at people or events in history that are important, but that you may not have heard about. So welcome. So for this lesson, we're going to be talking about some extraordinary women. In honor of Women's History Month, we're going to learn about some incredible women throughout history. These women were activists, artists, athletes, medical practitioners, scholars, and war heroes. So sit back and enjoy. So the first group of women we're going to talk about are activists. These are women who fought for people's rights, civil rights, and workers' rights. So the first woman we're going to be talking about is Frances Perkins. She was born April 10, 1880, and died May 14, 1965. And here's a great quote from her. "The door might not be opened to a woman again for a long, long time, and I had a kind of duty to other women to walk in and sit down on the chair that was offered." So, she graduated from college in 1902 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in chemistry and physics. After college, she moved to New York City and pursued social work. She started volunteering to help the poor. Frances also fought for women's right to vote, speaking out on street corners. In 1911, she witnessed a factory fire. 146 workers died. Most were immigrants, mostly young women and girls. Frances was outraged and was inspired to become an activist for workers' rights. Theodore Roosevelt, the former president, had heard about Frances and recommended that she run a committee on New York workplace safety. Frances was successful. Many of the fire precautions we have today, fire extinguishers, fire exits, fire drills, and water sprinklers, began to be implemented. She was then appointed to the commission that regulated workplace safety for the whole state. This made her the highest paid woman to hold public office in the United States. In 1929, New York's governor, Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, appointed Frances the state's industrial commissioner. In 1932, FDR won the presidential election. FDR wanted Frances as Secretary of Labor. Frances was 52, and she would be the first woman ever to join a presidential cabinet. Frances became one of the 10 most powerful people in the government, making suggestions for reducing unemployment and even testifying before Congress. She met with FDR every 10 days to give advice. FDR supported her ideas. Many people give her credit for FDR's New Deal. In 1935, FDR signed the Social Security Act into law, establishing insurance for older people, those who had lost their jobs, and aided those injured on the job. Frances had accomplished what she had set out to do. And the next woman we're going to be talking about is VIOLA DESMOND. She was born July 6, 1914, and died February 7, 1965. Here's a quote from her. "All I wanted was to see a movie. The policeman grasped my shoulders and the manager grabbed my legs, injuring my knee and hip. They carried me bodily from the theater out into the street." VIOLA was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She trained as a beautician and opened her own salon. She also created her own line of beauty products. Canada did not have the same levels of segregation as the U.S., but there were definitely areas where Black people weren't allowed. On November 8, 1946, VIOLA's car broke down in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. While waiting for the repairs, she decided to go to a movie. She requested a ticket for the main floor. VIOLA went inside but was told her ticket was for upstairs and that she'd have to move. She thought there was a mistake and asked to exchange her ticket for one in the main hall and offered to pay the difference. The cashier refused, telling her that they weren't allowed to sell downstairs tickets to "you people." VIOLA realized the cashier was talking about the color of her skin. VIOLA decided to sit in the main hall anyway. The manager told her to leave. VIOLA said that she had purchased a ticket and refused to leave. The police were called and VIOLA was dragged out of the theater, injuring her hip and knee. VIOLA spent the night in jail and was charged with attempting to defraud the government by refusing to pay the 1-cent amusement tax, the difference between an upstairs ticket and a downstairs ticket. VIOLA decided to fight the charges. VIOLA's case went to trial, but she lost. A judge fined her $26, which was a lot of money in 1946, even though VIOLA had offered to pay for the downstairs ticket. VIOLA knew the real reason she had been arrested. It was because of the color of her skin. She filed a civil suit, but it never made it to trial. However, VIOLA's actions helped contribute to the civil rights movement. VIOLA was badly treated in her lifetime, but her legacy lives on. She is even featured on the new Canadian $10 bill. VIOLA was a businesswoman, a teacher, a mentor, and a wife. She wasn't out to become an activist, but she fought injustice when it came knocking on her door. And the next group of women we're going to be talking about are artists. These are painters, writers, and performers. The first woman in this group that we'll be talking about is ARTEMISIA GENTILESCHI. She was born July 8, 1593, and died sometime in 1656. Here's a great quote from her. "As long as I live, I will have control over my being." Artemisia was born in Rome, Italy. Her father, Orosio, was a painter and trained her in his studio. By the time she was 17 years old, Artemisia had already painted several masterpieces. But people were skeptical. How could a girl be such a great painter? Her father asked a famous painter, Agostino Tassi, to become her mentor. Agostino started pursuing Artemisia romantically. She refused his advances, but he refused to stop. Eventually, Artemisia told her father about Agostino's harassment. Her father believed her. Even though Agostino was a powerful man, Orazio took him to court. During the trial, Agostino denied any wrongdoing. Artemisia was under tremendous pressure, including having physical pain inflicted during the trial, but she told the truth, that Agostino had assaulted her. Agostino was found guilty. Artemisia went on to become one of the most accomplished painters of her time. She became the first woman to become a member of the Accademia de Belle Arti di Firenze, an art academy in Florence, Italy. The next woman we're going to be talking about is Murasaki Shikibu. She was born sometime around 973 AD and died sometime in 1014 AD. Here's a quote from her. "Father, a most learned man, was always regretting the fact. Just my luck, he would say. What a pity she was not born a man." We don't know very much about Murasaki. She was probably born around 973 in Japan. We also don't know what her real name was. Murasaki is most likely a pen name. Her mother died when she was young, and she was raised by her father. She trained in music, art, and calligraphy. She was given a position of lady-in-waiting to the Empress. She started writing The Tale of Genji, a long-form novel, narrative prose, considered to be the first novel. This novel is enormous. It is a romance that follows the timeline of 4 generations and features almost 400 characters. The book became an instant bestseller. Hand-copied editions were distributed around Japan. She is considered the world's first novelist. And the next woman we're going to be talking about is Maria TALLCHIEF. She was born January 24, 1925, and died April 11, 2013. Here's a great quote from her. "From your first plie, you are learning to become an artist. In every sense of the word, you are poetry in motion." Maria was born on an Oklahoma Native American reservation. Her talent for dance was apparent from a young age. She started taking dance lessons at age 3, and by age 8, her family moved to Los Angeles for better dance lessons. At age 17, she joined the ballet company, the Ballet de Ruse de Monte Carlo. In 1948, she became the New York City Ballet Company's first star. Maria was a flawless dancer. She could handle the most complex choreography. She became America's first prima ballerina. She originated dozens of iconic roles in ballet. Maria became the first American to dance with the Paris Opera Ballet. She has been inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame. And in 1954, she was the highest paid dancer in the U.S. And the next group of women we're going to be talking about are athletes. These are warriors, wrestlers, and Olympic champions. And the first woman in this group that we're going to be talking about is Catullin. She was born sometime in 1260 AD and died sometime in 1306 AD. And here's a little painting that was from 1410 or to 1412 of her wrestling a potential suitor, but this painting was painted many years after her death, so it's probably not very accurate. Catullin was the great-great-great-granddaughter of Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongolian Empire. Her father raised her and her 14 brothers to value physical strength above all else. She spent most of her childhood besting her brothers in competitions of physical and mental strength. She began wrestling from an early age. She was not excited about getting married. She declared that she would not marry any man who could not defeat her in a wrestling match, and anyone who tried and failed would owe her 100 horses. She would eventually have 10,000 horses. She was an undefeated wrestler, and she was also a cavalry soldier. Her father tried to appoint her as leader before he died, but she refused. She decided she'd rather be a general. She's most likely died in battle at the age of 45. And the next woman we're going to be talking about is Wilma Rudolph. Wilma was born June 23, 1940, and died November 12, 1994. Here's a great quote from her. "My doctors told me I would never walk again. My mother told me I would. I believed my mother. Wilma was born in Clarksville, Tennessee. Fun fact, I lived in Clarksville, Tennessee for over a year, and there's a street named after Wilma Rudolph. When she was 5 years old, she contracted polio and was left with a paralyzed leg. She was told she would never walk again. For 2 years, her mother took Wilma for treatments, and every day Wilma had her weak leg massaged. Wilma used a brace to walk and was often made fun of by other children. Wilma got stronger, and when she was 12, she started walking by herself. She started playing sports and joined the track team. At 16, she qualified for the 1956 Olympics. She was the youngest member of the U.S. Olympic team. She won a bronze medal. She qualified for the 1960 Summer Olympics, where she won 3 gold medals and broke 3 world records. Wilma became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympiad, and the picture there of her is a photo of her winning the women's 100-meter dash at the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome. And the next group of women we're going to be talking about are medical practitioners. These are doctors and nurses. The first woman in this group that we're going to be talking about is Matilde Montoya. She was born March 14, 1859, and died January 26, 1939. A quote from her is her saying, "I am a doctor." Matilde was born in Mexico. She could read and write by the age of 4 and was ready for high school by the age of 12. When she was 16, she trained as a midwife, but she dreamed of becoming a doctor. Matilde joined the National School of Medicine. She was the only female student. At the end of her first term, the university tried to expel her. Matilde wrote to the President of Mexico and asked for his help. The President wrote to the university, telling them to stop the unfair treatment. She finished her courses, but then the university tried to stop her from completing her final exams. She wrote to the President again, and again he stepped in, passing a law that said all women could study medicine and become doctors. The President even traveled to watch her take her final exams. Matilde became Mexico's first female doctor. And the next woman we're going to be talking about is SUSIE King Taylor. She was born August 6, 1848, and died October 6, 1912. A great quote from her is, "I gave my services willingly, without receiving $1." SUSIE was born in Georgia, on a plantation. She was born a slave. When she was 7, her owner allowed her to go live with her grandmother, a free woman living in Savannah. She learned to read and write at a secret school for black children. During the Civil War, SUSIE was sent back to the plantation. Then she and other members of her family were taken by Union forces. Union officers asked SUSIE to teach formerly enslaved black soldiers how to read and write. SUSIE became a nurse during the war. She was the first black Army nurse during the Civil War. She worked alongside Clara Barton, who went on to found the Red Cross. After the war in 1866, SUSIE established a school for freed children. And the next group of women we're going to be talking about are scholars. These women were physicists, mathematicians, engineers, and astronomers. The first woman in this group that we're going to be talking about is Emily Warren Roebling. She was born September 23, 1843, and died February 28, 1903. Here's a great quote from her. "I have more brains, common sense, and know-how, generally, than have any 2 engineers, civil or uncivil." Emily was born in Cold Springs, New York. Emily met and married Washington Roebling. When he went to study engineering in Europe, Emily went with him, learning at his side. Washington's father was overseeing the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. Washington was appointed assistant head engineer. Emily was his assistant. But his father died, and he became head engineer. Then he suffered an accident on the job, becoming paralyzed and bedridden. Emily stepped up and became chief engineer. She had no formal training, but she had studied alongside her husband and was ready to learn on the job. They both worked on the bridge for 14 years. Emily was the first person to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. When it opened, she carried a rooster for luck. And the next woman we're going to be talking about is EMMY NOETHER. She was born March 23, 1882, and died April 14, 1935. Here's a great quote from her. "My methods are really methods of working and thinking." Emmy was born to a Jewish family in Germany. Her father was a mathematician. In 1904, the University of Erlangen allowed women students for the first time. Emmy immediately enrolled. By 1907, she had earned a PhD in mathematics. Emmy taught at the university for 7 years alongside her father, but the university refused to pay Emmy for her teaching. But she earned the respect of her fellow teachers. These teachers asked her for help with a problem. They were struggling with Einstein's theory of relativity. She worked with them and in the process proved a new mathematical result. It is now known as Noether's theorem and is an important part of physics. She also helped start a new branch of math called abstract algebra. Emmy is considered one of the most important mathematicians of the 20th century. And the next woman we're going to be talking about is Wang Zhenyi. She was born sometime in 1768 and died sometime in 1797. Here's a great quote from her. "Are you not convinced daughters can also be heroic?" Zhenyi was born in China. She loved math, science, poetry, and medicine, but her true passion was astronomy. She would spend hours studying the planets. People used to believe that a lunar eclipse was a sign that the gods were angry. Zhenyi didn't believe that and decided to prove it with an experiment, even though women weren't supposed to be involved in science. She put a round table in a pavilion, hung a lamp from the ceiling, and placed a round mirror off to one side. These represented the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon. She moved the objects just as they moved in the sky until they stood in a line with the Earth in the middle. She had figured out why lunar eclipses happened. She also wrote a paper that explained the force of gravity. And Zhenyi was also an acclaimed poet. And the last group of women that we're going to be talking about today are war heroes. These women were soldiers and spies. The first woman in this group that we're going to be talking about is Maria Oktyabrskaya. She was born August 16, 1905, and died March 15, 1944. Here is a great quote from her. "I've had my baptism by fire. I beat the bastards. Sometimes I'm so angry I can't even breathe." Maria was born into a poor Ukrainian family. In 1941, Germany invaded and Maria's husband went to war. He died in battle. She was enraged by her husband's death. Maria sold all of her possessions and used the money to buy a T-34 medium tank. She named the tank the Fighting Girlfriend. She then wrote to Joseph Stalin, telling him about her husband's death and asked him to send her and her tank into battle. Stalin agreed, and she was assigned to the 26th Guards Tank Brigade, an elite band of the Russian military. In her first battle, Maria breached the German position, killing 30 Nazi soldiers. She would often repair her tank in the middle of battle, under enemy fire. After a year, Maria was killed in battle. She was awarded the Gold Star of the Hero of the Soviet Union, their highest award for military bravery. And the last woman we're going to be talking about today is NOOR INAYAT Khan. She was born January 1st, 1914, and died September 13th, 1944. Here's a great quote from her. "The path of the heart is thorny, which leads in the end to bliss." Noor was an Indian woman born in Moscow and raised in Paris. She spoke perfect French. Her mother was an American poet, and her father was a musician and Indian prince. When World War II broke out, Noor's family fled Paris for England. There, Noor joined the British Special Operations Executive and trained to be an undercover wireless operator in the field. Because she could speak French, she was chosen to join a special group of spies in France, sending secret wireless messages between the British and the French. This was one of the most dangerous jobs for an agent. Less than a week into her first assignment, her whole network was captured, leaving her as one of the only British wireless operators in Paris. Noor took over the other agents' tasks, doing the work of 6 operators at once. Her code name was Madeline, and she outsmarted and outmaneuvered the Nazis at every turn, changing identities almost daily. Noor survived 5 months on the ground, when most agents lasted 6 weeks at most. She was eventually captured by the Nazis and spent 10 months in prison. She didn't give up any information. Noor was executed after almost a year of imprisonment. Her last word, according to other prisoners, was liberté, the French word for freedom or liberty. She was awarded the George Cross in 1949 and the Croix de Guerre, the highest award for bravery outside of combat. And here is a timeline of the women we talked about today. 973 AD, Murasaki Shikibu was born. In 1260, Cutulin is born. 1593, Artemisia Gentileschi is born. 1768, Wang Zhenyi is born. 1843, Emily Warren Roebling is born. 1848, SUSIE King Taylor is born. 1859, Matilde Montoya is born. 1880, Frances Perkins is born. 1882, Emmy NOETHER is born. 1905, Maria Oktябрьskaya is born. 1914, Noor Inayat Khan is born. 1914, Viola Desmond is born. 1925, Maria TALLCHIEF is born. And 1940, Wilma Rudolph is born. As you can see, that's almost 1,000 years of incredible women. So here are some books and websites that I recommend you reading if you want to learn more about these and other amazing women. The first book is Anthology of Amazing Women, Trailblazers Who Dared to Be Different by Sandra Lawrence. This is a great book with every woman gets their own page and their own great illustration. There's some fantastic women in this book. I highly recommend it. The second book is Brave Black First, 50-plus African American Women Who Changed the World by Cheryl Hudson. This is another really great book. It's got great illustrations, and I got SUSIE King Taylor's name out of this book. I'd never heard of her before. The next book is Bygone Badass Broads, 52 Forgotten Women Who Changed the World by Mackenzie Lee. And this is an adult nonfiction book, but it's pretty short. It's pretty tiny, actually, but it has some fantastic women in it. I got a lot of the great women out of this book. The next book is Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, 100 Tales of Extraordinary Women by Francesca Cavallo. This is a great juvenile nonfiction book. It has women all listed alphabetically. Each one has their own illustration. Each one has a quote. There's some fantastic women in this book. And the companion to that book is called Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, 100 Immigrant Women Who Changed the World by Elena Favilli. And this has some also fantastic women, but these women are all immigrants, and they're some really great names in this book. And then the next book is History versus Women, The Defiant Lives They Don't Want You to Know by Anita Sarkeesian. This one has some really cool women in it. The world's first novelist I learned about in this book, and a bunch of other really cool women. So I highly recommend it. And the next book I want to recommend is called Hooray for Women by Marcia Williams. This is a really fantastic little juvenile nonfiction book. It's all told in comic book form, and it's got some really fun women in there. The next book is Limitless, 24 Remarkable American Women of Vision, Grit, and Guts by Leah Tinari. And this is a really fun book. It's a pretty big one, and it's got an illustration for every woman. It doesn't give you a ton of information about each one, but it does spark the imagination about learning more about these women. And the next book is Noisemakers, 25 Women Who Raised Their Voices and Changed the World by Kazoo Magazine. And this is another graphic novel. Each woman gets her own little graphic novel story. It's fantastic. I got a bunch of really amazing, learned about a bunch of amazing women in this graphic novel. So if you have a chance, please check it out. And the next book I want to recommend is called Kate's Light, Kate Walker at Robins Reef Lighthouse by Elizabeth Spires. Now, I didn't have a chance to talk about Kate Walker in this lesson, but this is a really fantastic book that just came out. It's a picture book, a nonfiction picture book about her. So if you want to learn more about another amazing woman that I didn't talk about today, please read this book. And the last book I wanted to recommend is called The Only Woman in the Photo, Frances Perkins and Her New Deal for America by Kathleen Kroll. If you want to learn more about Frances Perkins and you want some really fantastic illustrations to go along with it, please read this new book. And here are a couple of websites I recommend going to learn more about some fantastic women. The first is the National Women's History Museum. They partnered with Google to create this whole exhibit online that you can go and visit virtually. So just Google National Women's History Museum, or you can go to the link below. It's artsandculture.google.com/partner/national-women's-history museum. And the last website that I recommend is a Library of Congress digital collection, and it's about SUSIE King Taylor, an African-American nurse and teacher in the Civil War that we learned about earlier. If you just Google SUSIE King Taylor, this is one of the first ones that pops up. But it's a really fantastic. It has a lot of cool information about SUSIE King Taylor. So if you wanted to learn more about her, please go visit that website. Okay, that's it. I had a lot of fun with this homeschool history lesson. I think this is going to be the last homeschool history lesson. So I really enjoyed doing these for you all. I've learned about some fantastic people. And I really hope you guys have learned and enjoyed from these lessons. So Next month, we're going to be having some new Homeschool Huddle videos, some poetry lessons, so those should be really cool. I hope you enjoyed this homeschool history lesson, and I hope you'll go and watch some of the other ones I've done. Bye!